given by Professor Krishnan. So today's talk is on arithmetic metroids associated to trees. So Krishnan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, all right. Okay, so this is wait, am I clicking correct? Okay, so this is based on joint work with Professor Ravindra Bapat from ISI Delhi. I think he's retired now, so he's uh, so this is the rough outline. So I'm I don't know what is the background that I can expect. So I'll recall matroids and tut polynomials associated to matroids, and so that's a very interesting area, especially matroids in general. See the things that you can do with a list of vectors, no, especially integral vectors, real vectors, all it's quite interesting. And so there are this notion of tut polynomial of a matroid, which has found itself used in about 20 different contexts. So that's a very interesting object associated to a matroid. And then recently there are some things called arithmetic matroids. Yeah, so that's a little more, that is, so when the vectors are integral vectors, then you can associate a little more data, and the counterpart is this arithmetic tut polynomial. So I'll define that, and I'll define some two such matroids using trees, and we'll compute their arithmetic tut polynomials. Yeah, so this is the rough outline I want to so if there are any questions, you can let me know, because I'll expect some background, but I'll give you this if there is something which I don't uh, I'm not defining anything, and there are a lot of references in this thing, and of course I have a lot of books also. So um, no we'll see. See, uh, I'll expect that whatever background I require, I'll tell you what is the background, I'll tell you the result, and then I'll describe what we are doing. Yeah, so in combinatorics in general, if you're given a finite set of vectors, even in R to the n, yeah, so there are several objects that you can associate with. So one is a matroid, which I call as AU. Yeah, this U is this set of vectors. So some people think of it as a list. So you can say which is the first vector, second vector, so on. That's okay. If you don't have this notion of first vector, second vector, that is also okay. It's a list of vectors. So you can have this matroid associated to this given list of vectors, and you can define several some hyperplane arrangements. That is, you can think of this vector as the normal vector to a hyperplane. So in 2D, if you have a normal vector, you can get a line. In 3D, if you have a normal vector, you can get a plane. So in general, in Rn, you can get a hyperplane, and you can think of the hyperplane as bisecting, some lying in Rn. So it will cut Rn into some number of, if you look at Rn minus this union of the hyperplanes, it will cut it into some number of components. How many components are there? Such kind of enumerative questions are well studied in combinatorics. So in general, if you have a vector, you can think of it as a normal vector to a plane. So that defines a plane actually. The normal vector defines the plane. And then you have several such planes. You can say, what is the number of regions that Rn minus this set of planes has? Things like that. They are always of interest to study. Yeah. So when this set of vectors U is clear, we'll abbreviate the matroid to A. Yeah, that's so AU. So the fundamental data that we start with is a given set of vectors. Yeah, in Rn. That's the standard. That's what we'll start with. Yeah. So so given a list, and I'll think of all vectors as column vectors. You can, if you're used to rows, you can transpose and take them. Somehow this column vectors I'm so used to, and that seems to be the viewpoint these days. So column vectors is what I'll assume that we are given a list of. So we'll assume that we have some column vectors, and sometimes instead of a list of column vectors, we are given a matrix, yeah, M, and whose columns form a list of vectors. So that is also given. These I'll go back and forth between these two, and I will not use anything where the order of the columns is important. If you want to find linear independence, things like that, the order of the columns will not be important. Yeah? So given a list of column vectors or a matrix M whose columns we are trying to see, so we want to associate some structure which models linear independence among these vectors. So this is a standard thing that we do in so this is basically a quick introduction to matroid theory. So matroids, if you study, so there, I think I have a couple of references coming up, maybe in the next or the so next slide maybe. I'll see. Yeah. So you can generally associate. So let's say you have one v1, v2 to vn are the vectors in R to the D. Let's say D-dimensional space. Yeah, and let's say they are the columns of some matrix capital M. Yeah, so you look at the columns. Let's say 1, 2, 3, etc. up to n. So let's say the square bracket n is the set 1, 2 to n. So that's actually the index set of the columns of this matrix capital M. Is it okay? So we have a D cross n matrix. Yeah, so each there are it's a D cross n matrix. Each call there are n columns, each of which is a D-dimensional vector. In R, you can think of it as vectors in Rd, and we look at all those subsets of columns which are linearly independent. Yeah, so when I say the script f, set of all subsets of 1 to n, such that the list Vi is I belonging to S is linearly independent. So this is one way to define a matroid. Yeah, this is a concrete way to define a matroid. So let me just recap this. We have v1 to vn. These are vectors in R to the D. The D is irrelevant actually. And now you have, let's say, the first vector, second vector, etc. N vectors. So look at all those possible combinations which are linearly independent, that you form as a set system. So this script f is only the set of all. It's a set system, and if you look at it, it's actually a simplicial complex, because if some S is a set of linearly independent vectors, any T which is subset of S will also be linearly independent. So this is downward closed. That is, if you look at the subset of the Boolean hypercube 1 to n. So here 1 to n is the index set of the columns. So you have column C1, C2, etc. up to Cn. And now, which are the subsets which form linearly independent subsets? Which subsets are linearly independent? If you look at that, that's not an ordinary set. That set has some rich structure. Yeah, this family F, as I say, is not arbitrary. It has some rich structure. Yeah, and this structure is what is a matroid. So we will use this matroid theory, and it's very, very useful. Matroid theory is useful if you either come from geometry, you get these matroids. If you come from optimization, there are a lot of these interesting optimization problems for which the greedy algorithm works. So matroid is one class of objects for which the greedy algorithm works. So by the greedy algorithm, I mean, if you look at this, so suppose you want to find a spanning tree. Suppose you have a graph and you want every edge is given some weight, let's say. So we have a connected graph, and let's say every edge is given some weight. We want to find a spanning tree of maximum weight or minimum weight. Then what do? So you just add weights in a greedy manner. So you look at, suppose you want to find a spanning tree of maximum weight. So you add the edge with maximum weight. Then you add the next edge with maximum weight. As long as you don't form a cycle. If you don't form a cycle, you just keep adding it. You add the top n-1. Top meaning the heaviest n-1. Start from the heaviest edge of the graph, then add the second heaviest. So you need for a cycle, you need at least 3 edges. Yeah, the minimum cycle has length 3. So you add the heaviest edge, then you add the second heaviest. If the third heaviest can be added without forming a cycle, you add it. So you just keep adding the topmost edges from the heaviest one, such that you don't form a cycle among the added edges. That will give you a maximum weight spanning tree. That's why it's a greedy algorithm. Greedy in the sense, you just go for maximum weight as much as you can, and that seems to work. And why? Because underlying it, there is this matroid structure. So these are things that we study in optimization and so on. So this matroids have wonderful properties from various contexts. So it is studied in, it's more than a simplicial complex. So it has some geometric context. It has some optimization features in, and then if you study some in enumeration combinatorics, it has some other interesting properties. So in general, this matroid theory is a rich theory. A lot of good results are known. It's a very, very fundamental thing, because the basic examples, they will all either come from graphs or from matrices, which are very, very straightforward. So the background that you require to study matroid theory is very minimal, but the results you get is it's a rich theory. So in that sense, it's a very good theory, this matroid theory. Yeah. So here are 2 references. So these are both reasonably recent books. This book, this Geometric Introduction, this Gary Gordon and Jennifer McNulty, Matroid's Geometric Introduction. So this is very, very highly recommended, because it's very, it doesn't presume any other basics. This book by Oxley is a second edition of it's a classic book. So this even more, no, it's because the second edition, more material is added. So this requires some more background. But this geometric introduction, this is a very, very painless introduction. So I definitely recommend this book for those of you who are interested in matroids. Generally, matroid theory is a beautiful theory, and which has connections to several different areas. Yeah, so that way matroid theory is something. And the basic things that you require are linear independent things that you teach in a first course in linear algebra. That can be just the basis for studying matroid theory, linear independence, some graph theory, things like that. All right. Okay, so if you have a matroid, for example, this is a matroid. That is, you start with a list of vectors, you look at all the subsets which are linearly independent. That is just not some arbitrary set. It has some rich structure, which is it forms a matroid. And you can get other matroids. So this matroid theory, the first, if you look at the first, let's say 50 pages of these books, either of the books, so they will actually, they'll define matroids in one manner and then prove some properties, and then show that you could have defined matroid in some other manner, and then so there are some 4 or 5 definitions, and they all are the same. So for example, if you look at this list of vectors, we are used to finding out the rank of a matrix. We have this idea of a rank. So you can define matroids via the notion of rank. So there is a rank based definition of matroid. That's it. It says submodular, things like that. So if you can define some using rank, you can get. So that's it. There are abstract definitions now of matroids and much more. So even though it started from a concrete perspective, now the theory has some abstract definitions. So there will be the study of matroids generally goes on to deal with firstly a few definitions, maybe using rank, concrete definitions, then using linear independence is concrete, then using rank, maybe you can define rank in some manner. So these kind of things that are which we are used to in a linear algebra course, those things will just keep coming again and again and in an abstract manner. So just as we have this, so I'll just go on to what is called as the Tutt polynomial, which is a very, very so this why do I mention this Tutt polynomial? Because there is this survey from 1982. 1982 meaning I was very, very, I was maybe wearing half pant and running in school. So that time he lists 19 areas of combinatorics. So now the survey, there are updated versions of the survey, not just 19. Now the list has gone up to something like 40. So there are about 40 different areas in which this Tutt polynomial, is used. So the Tutt polynomial is a property of the matroid. So it is a fundamental invariant. And if you plug in values, it's a bivariate polynomial, Ta of xy. So if you start with a matroid A, there is a polynomial Ta of xy. It's a bivariate polynomial. You can plug in values for x and y, and you can get in, for example, the number of regions in Rn minus the hyperplane. Yeah. So if the field is R, there are these quantities, the number of bounded regions, that also you can get. So bounded meaning, so if you have the hyperplanes, connecting, some regions will be infinite, that is they are unbounded. Some regions may be bounded. So you can actually define, how many bounded are there, how many unbounded are there, all those you can find out. Yeah. So the field is the real numbers, then you can get these enumerative quantities just by plugging in values for x and y in the Tutt polynomial Ta of xy. Yeah. And similar quantities, when the field is C, it gets a little more complex. We'll do that. So I don't need these things. I'm just trying to tell you that there is this notion of a matroid, which is very, very interesting, doesn't require too much basic study. And in that matroid theory, there is this idea of this Tutt polynomial, which has some very, very good applications. Example, in this 1982, there's a list of 19 such areas. And this Brailovsky, his students are this Gary Gordon and Jennifer McNulty. They say, they learned it from Brailovsky. So Brailovsky students are the authors of this book, which I very strongly recommend. Yeah. All right. So if these vectors arise from the oriented incidence matrix, so if you studied graph theory, there is this standard matrix tree theorem which counts the number of spanning trees. So there you would come across this oriented incidence matrix. So this is covered well in this book, Graphs and Matrices by Bapat, that I had referred to yesterday. And it's a good book. It's see, the book by Bapat is very slender. That is, overall it will be maybe 200 pages or 210 pages. That's it. But it covers a lot of interesting material. And there are much more is known about this oriented incidence matrix. This oriented incidence matrix is a very nice matrix. And if you take the oriented incidence matrix of a graph, you look at the columns of that and then look at linearly independent things, you get what are called as graphic matroids. Yeah, so there are classes of matroids, graphic matroids, Fox-Eaton matroids, quite a few things. No, matroids arising from different contexts. They all have some underlying properties. The matroid property, that is a very the definition I'm not getting into, but the important point is we have seen some examples. That is, take a list of columns, take a matrix, look at the list of columns which are linearly independent. That's a set system, which is a matroid. So matroid is a set system with some properties. Yeah. So this is a very general object, matroids. And if the graph is a tree, the Tutt polynomial, that actually is independent of the tree. So just like what we saw yesterday, the distance matrix of T, if you look at the determinant of the distance matrix, that was given by a nice formula. It only depended on the number of vertices and it did not depend on the tree T itself. Like that, if you look at the Tutt polynomial, the bivariate polynomial associated to the oriented incidence matrix of a tree, then it only depends on the number n of vertices in the tree. So this is also one of the good applications of this Tutt polynomial. And for example, you can use that to show that the chromatic polynomial of all trees is the same. Yeah, for all trees on n vertices is identical. So here is another polynomial which when you restrict to trees on n vertices, you get the same answer for all trees. That is, it doesn't distinguish between any tree. So what is this chromatic polynomial? This is related to finding out the number of proper colorings. So this was actually defined by Birkhoff, who tried to prove the famous four-color theorem. Now it's at that time it was a four-color conjecture when Birkhoff defined this chromatic polynomial. But this chromatic polynomial counts how many proper colorings there are for a given graph with some number of colors. Yeah. So if you fix the number of colors, let's say 5, how many 5 colorings are there of the graph? That will be given by this chromatic polynomial. In that polynomial, if you plug in 5, what number you get will be the number of proper 5 colorings in the graphs. So this chromatic polynomial is again a very nice. That it's a polynomial is very surprising. It's a polynomial of degree n, where n is the number of vertices in the graph. That itself is a little, you have to get used to it. So once the definition is clear and all that, you will get used to it. So the chromatic polynomial is a well-studied object, and in fact, people use it. This was defined because this famous four-color theorem. So people know it. It's a very amazing theorem, and there are 2 proofs known, both of which are very tough. Which says, that if you take any planar graph, that is, if you want to color the map, let's say, where every country is colored by some color, let's say. See, in the map you would have seen, in all our geography classes, when I was in class 7, 8 and all, I remember seeing it. And I think it will be there these days. I am not following the current syllabus. But if you look at any map, let's say the world map, yeah, there'll be a lot of countries, and then they'll color adjacent countries by a different color, so that you can just look at the color and you will realize that, so this contiguous piece is some country, that is another country, so on. So this, how many colors are required? Maybe, you require a large number of colors. What do we do? So you don't require a large number of colors. If the graph is planar, 4 colors is enough. That is what was conjectured earlier, and now it's a theorem, the 4-color theorem.
The 4-color theorem.
Correct. It's a tough theorem. So if anybody says I know the 4-color theorem, I think he's lying, because the proof is complicated, and there are some 600 cases or some large number of cases. The proof that there are only 600 itself is tough, and then of course there's a computer which checks these proofs. Whereas if you enlarge your space and say with 5 colors, I'm willing to relax it. With 5 colors, any planar graph can be colored. That is easy to prove. That I have taught in any graph theory course here. When I have taught graph theory here, I have taught the 5-color theorem, which is a it's a weaker form. So it says 4 colors are enough, but if you relax it to 5, then a proof is reasonably straightforward. But with 4, the proof is much harder. Yeah. So in general, this chromatic polynomial is a good polynomial associated to graphs, which counts the number of proper colorings with k colors. So in this polynomial, if you plug in k, what do you get? You will get some number. Whatever number you get, that is will be the number of proper colorings of the graph with k colors. Yeah. So this is and this again, the chromatic polynomial of all trees, is identical. Yeah. So there are a lot of results about trees which are somewhat surprising. That is, they are it's not clear, at first blush you will think, why is this happening? It's not clear. And then once you study it carefully, you look at it several times, you will get some feeling for it. All right. So as I've said, there are several definitions of matroids. So you define it using ranks, or you define it using this set of all columns of a matrix which are linearly independent, and so on. Yeah. So we will use this definition of a rank, that is for every subset A of the U. So remember, we are starting with a list of vectors U. For every subset A, there is this notion of rank R of A. Yeah? So this rank has to satisfy some property, submodular and all that. Yeah. So if you have this idea of a rank associated to every subset A of the list of you're beginning with a list U, take any subset A of that list U. For that subset A, if you can associate a rank R of A, this is possible actually. Yeah, this if you study matroid theory, within the first 40-50 pages you will get to this. That one of the consequences of definition is that there is this idea of rank. This actually models the rank that we know in linear that rank is the size of the largest linearly independent subset. No, that exactly is modeled by this. So that's why this is a good theory, because we are used to linear independence for all of us, and we've been teaching linear algebra. So that idea of linear algebra can be abstracted now. Yeah. So this definition of rank will say, the Tutt polynomial, this bivariate xy is subset of sum over all R subset of U, x minus 1 to the rank of U minus rank of R, y minus 1 to the mod R minus rank of R. Yeah. This is the definition, one definition of the Tutt polynomial. So just as we have several definitions, this is, and I've been saying that Tutt polynomial is very important, is used to find, let's say, a number of regions in the hyperplane arrangement that can be found using by plugging in values for x and y in the Tutt polynomial. There are quite a few things that you can, and the Brailovsky's survey gives you 90. Now there are about 40 good applications for this Tutt polynomial. So I'm just defining the Tutt polynomial. So for those of you who are not familiar with matroid theory, at least the takeaway for that is, here if you start with a list of vectors in R to the D, you can associate some structure called a matroid, which is has some rich theory, and 2 books. There are more than 2 books. These are 2 books which are good. And then you have this polynomial, bivariate polynomial called the Tutt polynomial associated to this matroid, which also finds applications in several areas where this matroid features. Yeah. So that is the for those of you who are not familiar with matroids, I mean, I will sum it up into this thing. So starting with a list of vectors, you can do wonderful things. So the good thing about maths is, of course you can do things with more advanced things, but even with basic things you can do wonderful things. So for example, a list of vectors in R to the D, if you start with a list of vectors, you can define good structures and do wonderful things with it. For example, matroids. Yeah, matroid is one such thing. Yeah. All right. So
what is R in that definition?
Yeah, R is any subset of R is any subset of U. So like I had said, A subset of U. So here is R is a subset of U. For every R, there will be a rank of R. Just like
means to find the Tutt polynomial, we have to take first U. And then for that U, then you get this summation technique.
U is given. U is the basic.
Fixed. U is fixed.
U is the list of vectors that we start out with. Yeah. Yeah. So U is given. So I used to call AU as the matroid, and if that U is fixed, sometimes they just call it as A without the U. So once the U is given, this U is the list of vectors. You can think of it in that way.
Okay.
For any subset A, you have this rank. Yeah, R of A. Sometimes R of A, sometimes rank. I sometimes write full, sometimes I write, maybe I could have written this here I could have written rank of A, in the definition. That's I'm just noticing it now. I'm really sorry about it. I'll try to correct it and send it. So R is a subset of U here, correct? So R is a subset of U. So all possible subsets of U get defined some rank. So x minus 1 to the rank of U minus rank of R, y minus 1 to the mod R minus rank of R. So the R rank of R will definitely not exceed R. So all of these will be non-negative integers. The exponents here, x minus 1 to the, what is the exponent? The exponents will not be negative. That we will not have, these will be polynomials. They won't be Laurent polynomials. They won't have, you won't have things like 1 by x, 1 by things like x to the negative exponent. That will not happen. Yeah. So
what is that?
Okay?
Script A.
Where? So A is this matroid that's associated with this list U. So I would have said somewhere 1 minute, maybe. So when this U is clear from the context, we'll abbreviate the matroid to A. So I will say
Okay.
matroid AU. So I should have maybe I could have reminded. I could have said this polynomial of A, the matroid associated to U. Yeah. So
So that is an order pair.
Which one?
U and A both gives us matroid. Okay.
Correct. No, U is a list of vectors. U doesn't give us anything. AU is the matroid associated
Okay.
to U. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. U is just a list of vectors. Yeah, we'll think of that for this talk. You can think of U as a list of vectors. And
What are the operations
script A.
defined on that set?
Sorry. Can somebody repeat?
What are the operations defined on that set?
Which set?
A, U,
This script A, the matroid.
yes.
So this
Yes,
matroid
sir.
is a set system, no? It's a set system. So you can have this notion of rank. You can. It's more than a simplicial complex. In the sense, it's there are no operations, and it's not like graph. So like if you ask what are the operations defined on a graph, that's a tough question. There are so many. I mean, the answer is at the same time easy and at the same time hard. No? There are so many operations. So likewise on a matroid, you can define several. You can define join of a matroid. You can define union of matroids. Quite a few things you can define. But if you look at just the list of vectors which are linearly independent, that set is not just a subset. So it's a set system. Set system meaning it's like a hypergraph. You have this U, which is the index set. You have some subsets of U. That is what we have. Some subsets meaning not just 2-element subset, 3-element, 4-element, any number. So you can have some set of subsets of U which are linearly independent. That is what we are trying to do. Yeah. So look at all those subsets of U which are linearly independent. That's so that family of subsets of U, no, that has some rich structure. That is the point. So if you have something which is linearly independent, let's say some set of size T is linear, some set T with K elements is linearly independent. Some other set with K plus 1 elements is linearly independent. Then from here, no, I can add something to this and get another K plus 1 size set which is also linearly independent. That's clear, no? This is something axiom which we teach in linear algebra. If you have, let's say, a K dimensional K, and I won't say dimensional. Let's say if you have list K columns which are linearly independent, and you have K plus 1, another set of K plus 1 columns. From this K plus 1 column, some column can be added to this column, and you can augment this K columns which are linearly independent to K plus 1 which are linearly independent. That we know, no?
Exchange
so those kind of
properties.
exchange property. Yeah. So you can have such properties. So those kind of properties what will define the matrix. So in general, it's an abstract way of looking at linear independence. It arose from linear independence. Yeah. So
can I just have
yeah,
just one sort of question?
Yeah.
For this TA,
yeah,
the right hand side does not seem to depend on A, script A.
Correct. That A is used because that U, no, A is
no. I mean, it looks as if you're taking all subsets of U. So it just depends on you. There's no A in there.
No. So that for some things, no, this rank will not for every A with a subset of U, you will have this rank defined. So this rank will be correct. So this rank will be correct. What you're saying is correct. So when rank of U equal to rank of R, it's just something power 0 into something power 0. So that it won't contribute. It's like that.
No. But if you have some the matroid is supposed to be independent columns.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas this is a sum over all columns.
R subset of
subsets.
U. Yeah.
This is a sum over all subsets.
Oh yeah.
So it has nothing to do with A.
No. The A is that's correct. So I should maybe sum not over all U, but R element of this AU. I can put that. Yeah.
Element of AU.
AU. Yeah. That's what I need. Yeah. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for this. Correct. Yeah. Thanks. So R subset of AU is what I require. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Thanks for the correction. Yeah. So this Tutt polynomial, as I said, is a useful polynomial that we define for a given matroid. Yeah. So given a matroid, we define the Tutt polynomial, and it's found applications in several things. So this is the bottom line that I want to convey to people who are if you don't know matroid theory, I'm really sorry, but you can read it. It's very interesting, and you don't require much background. Yeah, that's true. And what I want to say is that it's not hard. It's not as if it's some tough theory, some local cohomology where you require some 2 years of study and then you will come up to speed with understanding the terms. It's not like that. It's very easy. The basic things are very easy. And if you look at things that it will involve things that you know, like linear, like rank or linear independence, things like that. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say, yeah, about the Sturt polynomial. So the Sturt polynomial is this is the definition of Sturt. Okay.
Another sort of question there.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, if you have very large sets of U,
yeah,
and finding the independent subsets,
yeah,
should not be easy.
Correct. So see, just like finding rank, no? See, rank of a matrix. So the rank will be that you can find. So there are polynomial time algorithms. So, but even though this polynomial is the Sturt polynomial is not easy to compute. It is
it should be difficult when there are large number of things.
Yeah, correct. The Sturt polynomial is not polynomial time computable. The size of the largest element
in polynomial time.
No, it's not. No,
okay.
It's not. It's correct. It's more than NP complete. It's the Sharpe complete. You can, because of this, you can get Sharpe is where you count things related to NP. So here you can, using the Sturt polynomial, you can count a few things which are in general not polynomial time computable. So it's tough. The Sturt polynomial is way more general. So it's not easy from the computational perspective. This is not polynomial time computation. But the polynomial is very interesting to study. The properties of that is very interesting to study. That's what we're saying. So that's correct. Your point is correct that the Sturt polynomial is not polynomial time computable. If you want to write a program, if your list of vectors has, let's say, 100 vectors, finding the Sturt polynomial will take a lot of time. Yeah, it's going to finding the matroid and the Sturt polynomial will take a lot of time. That's true. That's correct. All right. So I will discuss some recent meaning 2012 to 15. There's been a recent development wherein you associate something called arithmetic matroids. That is, these are matroids to begin with, plus there is some arithmetic data. Yeah. So whenever there is arithmetic, so in general arithmetic meaning there is some not just real numbers but integers involved. Arithmetic is essentially integers. So integers are somehow also tied up to this theory of matroids. Yeah. So this is a good, again, it's a good book. I recommend this book. I have taught a course here out of these topics course from this book. So this is a good book, and the authors are famous. Claudio Procesi is a very famous algebraist, and De Concini is also quite famous. Yeah. So they are all famous, and the book is not, see, the background required is surprisingly little. That is, it's not as if you need to know a lot of topology, you need to know a lot of some other thing. It's not like that. That's why it's easy. It lures people because the background required is not immense. Yeah. All right. So here, what do we do for arithmetic matroids? So in general, the definition will say you start with a lattice, lambda, and each subset R of U gets assigned a multiplicity MR. That also satisfies some axioms. So I'll not go into the more general thing. I'll just say you start with a list of integral vectors in Z to the D or Z to the N. So rank, is as before. So rank meaning you look at just, so now instead of having real vectors, you have integral vectors. So now you're starting with a list of integral vectors. That's the first change. And then rank is as before. That is, you just look at linear independence. So you think of it as vectors in R, and then you can come up with a rank, an idea of rank. Yeah. Now only thing is you define this multiplicity M of R to be the GCD of maximal rank minors of the integral vectors. So is this clear? So you start with U, which is a list of integral vectors now. Yeah. Over Z. Yeah. All of them are vectors in Z to the D or some dimension. Yeah. And now if you take any subset R. So if you take some, so now you're essentially having an integral matrix, and you're looking at some fixed R set of columns, where R is the index set of the columns that you have chosen from the submatrix. In that, what is MR? It is the GCD of maximal rank minors. So what do I mean by GCD? So if you look at maximal rank minors, there will be at least one which is non-zero. No? If you look at minors, so rank, so see this rank, there are several definitions as we have taught in linear algebra courses. Rank will be, you can either define it as row rank, column rank, this pivot rank, and then you can say it's determinantal rank. There are quite a few definitions, and all of them will coincide. They will all be the same. So just like that, we have this GCD of maximal rank minors of the integral vectors. If you look at that GCD, that is a good candidate for this multiplicity. So again, here this theory involves some definition of this multiplicity, which is an attribute associated to every sub list of vectors that we start out with. MR is associated to every R, in the, and now rank is as before, but we have this idea of multiplicity. So here again, we have this similar thing. So here again, I've made the mistake. It should be R subset of AU actually, arithmetic Tat polynomial. Only exactly
Again,
the same.
if I
Again,
can-
same mistake.
Again, the previous page, maximal rank minors. Now, if you take minors, what do you mean by maximal rank minors?
No. So minors are sub. You take determinant of some column, no? Some subset of rows and columns.
Yeah.
You look at maximal rank minus. So maximal rank. So suppose the rank is maximal. So now that means there is some minor which is non-zero, no?
Yeah.
So then there may be several minors which are non-zero, which are of that same dimension. So you take all that list of all the determinants. So you look at, suppose it's a 3 by 3 rank. So you have 5 columns. Suppose you chose 5 columns, integers. Let's say the matrix is has column vectors, each of which is 10 dimensional, and I'm choosing 5 columns. So now I have 5 columns, each of which is a 10 dimensional vector. What is the rank? Maybe my rank is 3. Let's say. So now there is some 3 cross 3 submatrix which is non-singular, no? But there are maybe several 3 cross 3 submatrices which are non-singular. So you look at all the 3 cross 3 submatrices which are non-singular. Look at their determinants. Take the GCD of that.
Okay.
Is it okay? I mean,
It's better.
Good. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'm happy to reply. So is this example okay? Let me just repeat whatever I said. So we are starting with some list of vectors, let's say in Z to the 10.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Instead of saying rank, it's a minor, no?
What?
3 by 3 minors, no?
Correct. So
3 by 3 minors.
Correct. So that's why maybe that's what is rank. When I say maximal rank, that means the rank of that list is some number. So there will be some k cross. If the rank is k, no, of a list of vectors, there will be a k cross k submatrix which is non-singular, no? So you look at those, and then maybe there are other k cross k submatrices which are also non-singular. So you look at all of them, and then you look at the GCD of that. Is that okay? That is a good candidate for this multiplicity M of R. So this M of R is another attribute that is associated, because now your data is integral. It is so you can, as I said, you can change it to some lattice that we'll not get into it. Let's just stick to concrete integers. So
it is not clear why we are using the word rank in the maximal rank minus. We are determining only determinants of those minors.
Correct.
So
the
what
GCD
is the
of
purpose
maximum
of
minors. So
determinant of?
Say that again, please.
For finding this maximal rank minor.
Yeah.
So for finding the GCD, we are finding determinants only, and we are taking maximum out of it.
Yeah. So
what is the purpose of word rank?
No. If you don't take, some of them will be maximal. I don't want arbitrary. Maximal meaning only the 3 by 3 I want in this example.
There will be one maximal rank minor, so
which is non-singular, because otherwise it may be 0.
Yeah.
I mean the GCD may be 0, no? I mean, if I don't put maximal, then you can take some other smaller thing and it may be 0, or larger. I'm saying not smaller, larger, and it may be 0.
So
is the example okay? So I'll just repeat the example once more. See, suppose you have vectors which are in Z to the 10, and let's say I have some list of vectors. Now I choose, let's say, a subset of 5 columns. No, I have chosen 5 columns. Each column is a 10-dimensional vector with integer coordinates. Now, if you look at the rank of this, suppose it happens to be 3. What does that mean? That means there is some 3 by 3 minor, which is, so minor meaning what you're okay with determine. You want to change what term? You tell me if you want to change it, and I'll tell you if I agree with that. So there is some 3 by 3 submatrix which has non-zero determinant. No. So maybe there is some other 3 by 3 submatrix which also has non-zero determinant. So you look at all these 3 by 3 choices which are non-zero. You take the GCD of their determinants. That is a good candidate for this multiplicity.
Do you mean to say it is smallest?
So sorry, say it again.
Of smallest order matrix which is non-zero.
Oh no, largest.
Largest. So
largest. That's why
4
I'm saying
by
maximum.
4.
Yeah, 4 by 4.
4 by 4 will be everybody will
all
be
of them
0.
will be 0. Yeah, maybe.
That is what.
Yeah, that's why I'm using maximal in that sense. That's why I want
all order
to say,
determinant which is non-zero.
Sorry, say that again. What order?
Small order
No, small
determinant.
even 1 may be, no. See, if
It
we have a,
can-
it can be
Okay,
1,
okay.
then I don't want 1. See, I don't want to just take GCD of 1 by 1 minus, which is all the entries, that non-zero entries. That I don't want. I want only maximal rank minus. So that's why I'm saying maximal rank. But is the context clear from the? If you want me to change, what is causing trouble? Or if you have some change, if can somebody suggest a change? I can.
No, sir, it is understood.
It is okay. Okay, sure. Any questions? You please let me know. Yeah. So this is yet another point. I'm happy that people are following, and any questions, please let me know. If so, is it clear what I want? This multiplicity of a subset R of the columns will be, you look at that columns, the columns in R, there will be some rank. Rank will be some number which is less than the number of column mod R, but it will be the max largest. Look at all possible that minors of that maximum size, which are, so at least one will be non-zero. So you look at that. In fact, see, if you take GCD, so in many books, they say if you take GCD of A1, A2, and 0 is one of the elements in that. So you can define GCD of not just 2 terms, GCD of A1, A2, you can define GCD of A1, A2, A3, etc. Yeah. If you have zeros, you can omit them. Yeah. So if that is allowed, then you can just say GCD of all the maximums. Some people will say, remove the 0 elements and then take the GCD. Both are okay. So if there is this slight, I've seen some books which take GCD of some list of elements where 0 is allowed in that list, and some books will say no, 0 is forbidden. That there is I don't know a good convention. Both conventions I have seen. So that can be a potential problem here in the definition. But anything else? Okay, so is this okay? This rank. So we have this idea of multiplicity, which is a good, we have this arithmetic Tutt polynomial, if very, very similar to the definition. And again, here I should sum over not R subset of U, but R element of AU. That's all I should have. So you put the same thing as before. Only thing is you add this coefficient of multiplicity M of R. Yeah, this M of R you add to it. That's an extra term. That's it. This has some extra features that make a little more. So this is like augmenting. This is only more special. That is only when you have a list of integer vectors you can define this. And in this case, this has some other many theories, many things that are done for matroids are now done for arithmetic matroids. Yeah, in fact, it's a good arithmetic polynomial arithmetic. Quite a few things have done. So these similarly, there are some, just like you had hyperplane arrangements there. These are connected to toric hyperplane arrangements. Yeah. So, and as pointed out, this computing this arithmetic Tutt polynomial is sharply complete. This Tutt polynomials in general, they are all somewhat tough to compute. That is, if you give me a large list of vectors, finding the Tutt polynomial is not straightforward. It's not some computer. You can write a program, but the program will take a long time to complete. So it's programmable, but it's not. The program will not efficiently come to a halt. That it may not. That's what I'm saying. In the worst case, it will not. Yeah, we don't know. See that I won't say it will not. When I say it's sharply complete, that means it's the expected thing is that it won't terminate in good time. We don't have a proof yet, but that is, underlying it is this conjecture that P not equal to NP, which is one of the big problems, open problems. Yeah. So this, so till now, if I just have to sum up, so you have this idea of matroid, which arises from a list of vectors and an arithmetic and a Tutt polynomial associated to matroids. And now in the special case, when your list of vectors lies in Z to the D, you can define a little more arithmetic data, which is, this, for example, GCD of maximal minors. That if you embed that gives you a little more data, and that again finds use in other just like you had Tutt polynomials were related to hyperplane arrangements. This arithmetic Tutt polynomial is related to toric hyperplane arrangements. In some others, exactly the theory is kind of parallel. So if you study one, you can study other things. It's easier to study because you have a handle for what matroids can do. Okay. So this is like roughly the basic of matroid theory that I want to give for this thing. So I'll give you an example
just
here.
Sort of this. Is there some way of understanding why you're taking x minus 1 to see rank U minus rank R is believable? It has something.
Correct.
Yeah. Why x minus 1 to that and y minus 1 to that? Why not x to that?
Or
something else.
I mean, if you want x to that, you can just, that's a simple transformation, no? That's just x minus 1. So the definition is motivated by what that you can, for example, the chromatic polynomial, no, of the graphical matroid, that can be obtained by plugging in values for x and y. That's all there is. It's just that's why you get this x minus 1 powers and y minus 1. This is just a simple transformation. You don't have to worry about the form. If you want to put it as x, that's okay. Then later you can change. Those are minor transformations. It so happens that the definition is x minus 1. That is, apart from that, I don't know what else is a good satisfactory answer. The exponents are good, as you're saying, and if you want, you can change it to something x power thinking y power something. That's okay. That's not a, so in general, no, if you put x equal to 1, y equal to 1, what do you get? That is where this matroid thing comes. If you put x equal to 1, y equal to 1, you get, usually you will get 0 power something. No, that's only the exponents which contribute to 0. 0 power 0 is 1 we have by convention. Only those will contribute. So that is the reason behind defining it to be x minus 1 power something, y minus 1 power something. That's the only in the context of chromatic polynomials and all that. When you evaluate the Tutt polynomial, no, that is the only reason why this x minus 1 comes. Yeah, it's not the generating function in that sense. Generating function, I would have said x power something, y power something. That is a good generating function. Here it turns out to be x minus 1 power something, y minus 1 power something. Is it okay? It's maybe not that satisfactory, the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I'll just give you an example, and we'll compute the arithmetic Tutt polynomial of this toy example, and then we'll go on to some. So here I'm having a list of 3 vectors in Z2. So the first vector is 3. So I wanted to write it as column vectors, but then it became too big. The example didn't fit in a page, so I could have put a transpose. Maybe I missed it. I'm really sorry. This 3, 0, you think of it as column vectors. 3, 0. It's a 0, 2 and minus 1, 1. Yeah, these are elements of Z2. So I have 3 vectors A, B, and C. I'm just calling it A, B, and C so that I can do this multiplicity of A, B, the subsets here. Yeah. So for our subset of U, we have the multiplicity, M of R. Yeah? So this equals the GCD of maximal rank minors of the integral vectors. So if you look at what is M of the empty set, that is 1 by convention. If you look at M of ABC, the multiplicity of this ABC, that is, so you have this 3, 0, 0, 2, minus 1, 1. So this, because 3, 0, 0, 2 is there, it's the rank 2. This set system has rank 2. So what is the GCD of maximal rank minors? You can check that it turns out to be 1. Yeah. So this, so there are at most 3 of them, because it's a full row rank. It has full row rank. So only thing is columns. Which are the columns which give? So all of them are linearly independent. No, see, AB is linearly independent. AC is also linearly independent. BC is also linearly independent. So if you look at the minors, you look at the GCD, it will be. So AB, see here, I have AB, multiplied of AB is 6, multiplied of BC is 2, multiplied of AC is 3. So GCD of 6, 3, and 2. This is what I want. Yeah, I have computed them below here. Yeah? So this M of ABC follows from this. Yeah, because we have this the GCD for, see, GCD for AB, that's clear, because AB is 3002. No, 3002. So there is only one maximal minor, which is, so the determinant value is 6. And when you take GCD, you have to take absolute value of the determinant. Yeah, because if the determinant can be negative, but GCD, when you take GCD, will always be so GCD of some negative numbers. How is it defined? Those kind of things. Always the GCD is non-negative. Yeah. So if you look at M of A, A itself, 3, 0. So what is the maximal rank minor in this 3, 0? So the maximal rank minor is 1. It's a, and it's the GCD of 3 and GCD of 0. It's a GCD of 3, 0. So that's why M of A is 3. Is this okay? M of A, multiplicity of B, GCD of this 0, 2, this vector. Again, it's a rank 1 thing is 2. If you look at this vector C, is minus 1, 1. So GCD of 1 and minus 1, that is 1. Okay. And likewise, M of AB, if you look at, these are all full rank. This means a 2 by 2 matrix with full rank. So essentially the determinant, absolute value. Yeah, that's what we. So M of AB is 6, M of BC is 2, BC is so 0, 2, minus 1, 0, 2, minus 1, 1. No? Yeah. So there's a 0 there. So only one cross term will appear in the determinant. And likewise, M of AC 3, 0. There is 1, 0. Okay. Okay. So if you look at the arithmetic, the multiplicity, the arithmetic Tutt polynomial MA of xy. So it will be this corresponding to this empty set. We have this x minus 1 power. Yeah? So here all possible subsets are there in the matroid. Yeah? So x minus 1 squared will come. with why do we get x minus 1 squared? Let's see. So it's x minus 1 to the rank of u minus rank of r. So when you take r equal to empty set, rank of r is 0 because it's the empty set. Rank of u is 2, and so look, r is, so here mod r and rank of r are the same. When mod r and rank of r are the same, this y minus 1 power something will not contribute. Yeah. So for the empty set, so I'm going to now sum over all of these. So these all are there, and all of these are there in my mate. So I get this x minus 1 squared comes from this empty set, and likewise you can check the other ones. Yeah. So this is some example I worked out. Yeah. So I mean the singleton sets, let's say A, B, and C, they will give me this 3. The multiplicity is also coming. Let's see why it gives x minus 1. So it's x minus 1 power rank of u minus rank of r. This is 2 minus 1. Y minus 1 power 1 minus 1. Yeah. So these are, this is 0. So at least this term, oh, sorry, I went behind. Sorry. So this 3 plus 2 plus 1 into x minus 1. Is this okay? So likewise you can just check the remaining. Yeah? All right. So I'll just it is a simple example for this computing the arithmetic Taut polynomial, and I'll now go on to this thing which see, as we've seen yesterday, in the previous thing, there are a lot of these matrices that are associated to trees. So I'm interested in trying to find out, if you associate some matrix to a tree, and then you start with that list of column vectors of that matrix. So that can also, if that matrices are integral, you can think of them as a list of integer vectors and try to find Taut polynomial, arithmetic Taut polynomial, so on. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do in this. So now for in the previous talk, we saw about the determinant of the distance matrix. So now you have this exponential distance matrix. Yeah. So take a tree T. So it's connected. Take a tree on n vertices, and you look at the exponential distance matrix ED of T. Yeah. So this turns out to be, so the ijth entry is q power the distance in the tree between I and j. Yeah, where q is a variable, q to the 0 equal to 1. So here are the exponential distance matrices associated to this tree on the left. You have this EQ. To the tree on the right, you have this DQ. So EQ, is it clear that because it's a star, the distance, all diagonal entries will be 1 because it will be q to the 0. Q to the 0 is 1. The distance between a vertex and itself is 0. So q to the 0 will be 1. And likewise here you get q to the 1, q to the 1, so on. Yeah? All these things are q to the 1. That is because you have q to the distance between. So between 1 and 2 is the distance is 1, 1 and 3 distance is 1, 1 and 4 distance is 1. So that's why the first row will be 1 q q q. Here it will be, the first column will be 1 q q. The other things will be 1, and the off diagonal entries in this 2 to 4 submatrix restricted on vertices 2 to 4. They'll off diagonal entries will all be q squared, because in distance 2 you can go from 2 to 3, 2 to 4, and 3 to 4. Yeah. And likewise here you will get similar. The distance matrix, you remember, if we saw it yesterday, it was 0, 1, 2, 3. If you raise to the exponents, you get 1 q q squared q q. Yeah. So it's just like that. Yeah. So now I want to describe, these are the matrices we are going to consider. So I'll describe a few things that we already know. So this is the famous paper of Bapat, Lal, and Pati, which I also referenced yesterday. So the determinant of the exponential distance matrix, that is given by this nice formula. It only depends upon this n, which is the number of vertices in the tree. It is otherwise independent of the tree. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, which is okay. So several results are known, like we've seen yesterday. This determinant of the distance matrix is also known. Yeah. So what we do is we assign q equal to r for some integer value r, and after this assignment, treat the rows of EDT as a list of vectors. Yeah. So I have said rows. You can say columns. This is a mistake. I should have said columns. I'm now using column vectors. Yeah. Okay. And now if you look at this, if you look at the determinant, see, the determinant vanishes when q equal to 1 and minus 1, because it's 1 minus q squared. So 1 and minus 1 I will not put for r, because then this matrix will have, it won't have full rank. And for another reason, I'll omit this 0 also, because then it will become the identity matrix. If you put q equal to 0, then all diagonals are 1. Off diagonals will have q power something, and q power, that q equal to 0 you're putting, so it will become identity matrix. So then it's of no interest. Identity matrix is so that's why we omit these 3 values of r. So you can plug in any, start with a tree, look at the exponential distance matrix of the tree, So that has a variable q. Yeah, so the ijth entry is q power dij. Yeah, distance between I and j in the tree. Yeah. So in this, we're going to plug in some value r for this variable q. Yeah, and we will not allow 3 values, plus minus 1, which that will make this exponential distance matrix singular, and 0 we will not plug in because it will make it equal to the identity matrix. So it's not of interest. So these 3 values we will omit. Otherwise, you can plug in any other value. Yeah, all right. So we are interested in finding the arithmetic third polynomial. So this also, as I said, no, all my talks in this, all the 3 talks can be thought of as trying to use computers to, explore some things and then try to prove some theorems. Yeah, that's what I do for most of my life. That is, I try to use computers and try to try to prove something. So of course you have to read some background and then you try to do something. So this, when we were doing this work with Bapat, so I was asking, do we get something when you try to put some, you treat these vectors, either row vectors or column vectors, it doesn't matter, it's a symmetric matrix. So you either treat the row vectors or the column vectors. Can we plug in some values and try to see whether what we get, that arithmetic matroid we get, has something interesting? Then he was saying no, but then we have to look at all GCD of minors. That may be tough. In general, if you want to look at if you're given an arbitrary matrix, if you want to find the GCD of arbitrary minors, that is a little GCD is a little tough. But we were pleasantly surprised. So I wrote some programs in Sage, and then the answers it gave were so the pattern was so obvious that I thought, there has to be something good. And then once I told Bapat, he said, no, I don't believe. Can you send me the program? So I sent him the program. Then he ran it on several trees. Then he told me, yeah, I'm also surprised that it's the the data is so nice. So let me state the theorem. All right. So this is the important thing. So if you look at this, any R subset of, so U for us is the set of all columns from the set of all columns of the exponential distance matrix of a tree. So we start with a tree, look at the exponential distance matrix, look at all the columns U. Yeah. And now for every R subset of U, so this is a full rank matrix. So because we are plugging in Q, which is not 1 and minus 1, it's a full rank matrix. So the matroid you get is actually, the full matroid, that is all subsets of 1 to n. Yeah. So if you look at this M of R, for any R subset of U, so that means R is a subset of the columns of the, so it's a set of vertices of the tree. Yeah. The multiplicity MR is equal to the GCD of maximal minors in the matrix EDTR. Yeah. So is it clear? So now I have an n by n matrix. So n is the number of vertices in the tree. You look at the exponential distance matrix, that's an n by n matrix. You look at some choice of R columns. Yeah. So now I have mod R columns, each of which is an n by n dimensional vector. Yeah. Now if you look at this, it turns out the whole matrix is non-singular. That's because of this theorem of Bapat-Lalanpati. It's the determinant is 1 minus q squared power n minus 1. So if you plug in q, which is not plus or minus 1, definitely the matrix will be non-singular. So all columns are linearly independent. So now if I want to find the multiplicity M of R, no. So what is the description of M of R? I have some set of columns R. Yeah. And it's a full column. That is, the rank is full. The whole the matrix itself has full rank. Yeah, it's an n by n matrix with rank n. I've chosen some R columns, and then so now if you look at it, definitely it will have rank R. Yeah. Now you have to look at all possible choices of rows of size R, and then look at the GCD of the minors. So if you fix an R set of R columns, look at some choice of R rows. So there are n choose R choices for rows. That will give me an R by R matrix. You have to take the determinant and then you vary the GCD over all the n choose R choices for rows. Is it clear what this multiplicity M of R is? So M of R is the GCD of the maximal minors, because this full matrix has full rank. The matrix itself has full rank. It's an n by n matrix with rank n. So if you choose a list of R columns, definitely they are linearly independent, because all columns are linearly independent. So some subset of columns is definitely linearly independent. So if I've chosen, let's say 5 columns, rank is 5, and now I have n rows. So there are n choose 5 choices for rows, which will give me, all of them, which one, some of them may be non-zero, some of them may be 0, but I have to take GCD of over the non-zero choices. So this is what we have to find, and this is the only lemma which is of we think it's of independent interest because we are putting it in an arithmetic context, but I still don't really quite understand the significance of this, because it says no, let EDT be the exponential distance matrix of a tree. Yeah, let R be a subset of, so rows you can change to columns. It's a symmetric matrix. I'm really sorry, I'll change it to columns with mod R equal to K. Yeah, so then multiplicity of this R, no, the set of R columns is Q squared minus 1 whole to the K minus 1. So it only depends upon the K actually. So the GCD is also of maximal minors if you fix K columns. So if you choose K columns, it doesn't depend which columns you have chosen. That also is irrelevant. That which columns have you chosen, that is irrelevant. How many columns have you chosen, only that is relevant. Is this lemma clear? This content of this lemma. So you take the exponential distance matrix, you fix R columns. Yeah, and what I want is R is non-zero. This R equal to mod R equal to K with K bigger than 0. So now what is the, no matter what choice of columns you take, no, as long as you choose one column, the maximal this M of R will be the same, independent of what columns you've chosen. If you choose two columns, whether you choose column 1, column 2, column 5, column 6, it doesn't matter. For all of them, this GCD is the same. MR is the same, independent of the choice of the columns. It only depends on the number of elements in the columns that you've chosen. That is this. So this lemma was a little tough for us to prove, but we didn't believe it actually. I mean, to be frank with you, we just didn't believe, because it looks so simple.
Can I just ask one question? I mean,
yeah,
what about the remaining part? The GCD is this much, it's multiplied by something, the other factor. Can you say what the other factors are?
No, what, say that again, please.
This is the GCD.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is GCD into something is the minor.
Correct.
Okay. Is there something you can say about that other factor?
No, that the other factor, see there, for one it will be 1, for one minor it will be 1. That will be the for one minor it turns out to be 1. This one turns out to be, and for other things it turns out to be some Q squared, Q cube, some Q power, some things are coming. We don't know a good answer for that. The GCD for one
but
minor,
it's a power of Q. Is that also correct?
It's a power of Q.
It's not a polynomial, it's a power.
It's a power, just a power. Yeah, it turns out to be just a power. We don't have a proof. I have not yet proved it, but it in all examples it turns out to be a power of Q, and we don't know why.
Okay.
So that's another interesting thing. So maybe there is something interesting here that we can try to do. I don't know. Yeah, because this we just don't know. This is a result we are able to prove, and yeah, I can place it in a context of arithmetic matrix. Yeah. All right. Okay. So this is the result. This is the proof is a little tough for us to prove, but by induction and all that we could manage, because trees have some inductive structure. We can do something. Yeah. All right. So if you look at the exponential distance matrix, if you look at the arithmetic cut polynomial, so essentially you see this M of R is just something power K minus 1. So where R is K, no, so it's something like alpha power K minus 1. So if you're summing over this arithmetic cut polynomial, no, yeah, here, so you're summing over here the R subset of U. In this case it's okay because it's a full rank. The tree that we have is the matrix that we start out with is a matrix with full rank. So you get the complete Boolean poset as the matroid, and then so you get some multiplicity which is some only dependent on the value of mod R, and the others here also, see the rank, it's full rank, so rank Q minus rank R, it turns out to be independent of the choice of R. Mod R minus rank R turns out to be, so that this thing will never even contribute. So we get something as only a univariate polynomial in this case. The Y term will not even be there. I'm sorry. Yeah. And it's something like something power n, yeah, Q squared. No? So this you can just work out because the multiplicity is exactly this, Q squared minus 1 whole to the K minus.
Yeah. So why is this multiplicity called multiplicity? Is there any reason?
Yeah, it's somehow in this lattice theory, this people who I'm used to the integer lattice, but there are some people who study lattice theory, and by lattice I don't mean this. Lattice is used as a poset which has some meet and join is also called a lattice. That's not the lattice. This lattice meaning it's a discrete subgroup of Zn. In that thing, somehow this multiplicity term is they say it matches what is called as multiplicity, which is studied by lattice theorists. So I don't know much of lattice theory myself, but they say that theory exactly what the GCD of maximal minors, that turns out to be what is called some multiplicity, and I don't know enough of this. So that thing gets into some arithmetic geometry, which I don't understand. I don't understand it well. I don't know the background. And I'm at a loss. When I ask people, everybody says, yeah, the experts say it's easy. but I don't see, a good book where, you can read it. I'm very open to reading books. In fact, I have a lot of books and I'm happy to read, but I don't see a good source where, from whatever I know, or I can read a little more extra. I can go and read a good amount of arithmetic geometry. That part I don't know. I don't know a good reference. I asked several people. If anybody can help, I will be happy, in knowing what this, what is a good source. See, this math at some point it gets technical, which we agree, but then there are not good enough sources, or at least I am not aware of. That is my, my ignorance. And I've been asking people, but I have not gotten a good answer. So I mean, I just have to meet some right person and figure out, sit with them. That I have to do. That's so. To put it in short, yeah, I don't know the answer. Yeah, that is the answer. I should be honest. Yeah, that is. So if you look at it, you get exactly, sigma n choose k. There are k here. There are n choose, here n choose k choices for R, where the multiplicity is the same, and then these factors will be the same. Yeah. So that's why some n choose k will come. That's why it's some binomial thing. Yeah. So here is this n choose k choices. It will be q squared minus 1 to the k minus 1, x minus 1 to the n minus k. N is rank of the u minus rank of R. So that will be this. And the empty set, that case you will get. So essentially this if you simplify, you will get this. Yeah, that is the proof. Yeah. So this is the so it tells you this. So now I'll come up with another similar matrix. This also I had mentioned last in the previous lecture. This is the Q Laplacian. So by definition is I plus Q square into D minus I minus Q times the adjacency matrix. So this is a concrete matrix. This has the determinant of this up to some scalar value is equal to the Ihara-Selberg theta function of the graph. Yeah, that is also known. Yeah. So this, you look at this Laplacian matrix. This, yeah, if you set Q equal to 1 in this, you get the original Laplacian. Which put Q equal to 1, you get I plus D minus I minus A, which is D minus A, which is the usual Laplacian, which is well studied by all graph theorists. So here, this is again a very surprising result of Bapat-Lahavan-Pathy. So this is the same 2006 paper. That paper has 3-4 results which are very, very surprising. So if T is a tree on n vertices, Q Laplacian LT, determinant of LT is 1 minus Q squared. It doesn't even depend on n. Earlier, at least, the determinant value depended on n. This is even more basic. That is, it's just 1 minus Q squared. It doesn't even depend on n. All that it depends on whether it's a tree or not. If it's a tree, it is 1 minus Q squared. If it's not a tree, it is something else. More. It will be the Ihara-Selberg theta function that into some scalar. So it is just 1 minus Q squared. This is even more. That is that n also is not featuring in this. It is even more basic. Yeah. So for this also, we
just again one sort of comment in this previous thing.
Sure.
You're calling this Q Laplacian. Now this is not the same way that you said Q polynomial or whatever earlier. One was replaced by 1 and 2 was replaced by 1 plus Q.
Oh, no. That is the Q analog of the distance matrix. Yeah, that is the Q analog of the distance matrix. This is the Q Laplacian. Yeah. That is a Q analog of the distance matrix.
Is there a relation or there's no relation between
that there is a relation. Yeah. No, this is a different matrix that is associated to the tree. Because this is related to the Laplacian.
It's not the Q analog in the same that you had the Q analog there.
Correct. There is Q analog of the distance matrix. This is Q analog of the Laplacian. There is no distance involved here. This is just I plus Q squared into D minus I minus QA. There is no distance at all. To define the Q analog of the Laplacian, we don't need distance at all. It's a different concept. There we had Q analog.
So just a comment here that this determinant, the zeta Ihara, the zeta function is the inverse of the determinant. It's so just one thing, okay? And the fact that the determinant of LT is 1 minus Q squared is because the trees have no
cycles, no backtracking. Correct.
Okay, so no backtracking, no cycles, etc.
Correct.
Therefore, from Ihara zeta function, this is going to follow immediately. It's n minus 1. Okay.
Correct. The scalar will come. That is m minus n. So m will be n minus 1 and n something. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So from that perspective, this is much easier.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that is another way to see this, because that there are no cycles. So it's an empty product. It's a trivial product. So that is also a way to see it. Yeah. So that's correct. Yeah. So this determinant of Q analog of the Laplacian. So this here again we find, if you start with the Q Laplacian LT and then you do the same thing, you set some value for Q. So again we'll avoid 1 and minus 1, and in that case, if you look at the multiplicity, it turns out to be Q squared minus 1. Yeah. So this, once you do for one thing, you can try to do it for the other, and then And indeed, this last class also at last lecture we had mentioned that this exponential distance matrix, no, the inverse is the Q Laplacian up to scalar. So that's why, but in general doesn't mean this minors will go through, but by some real, there is a theorem of Cauchy which relates minors of a matrix to minors of the inverse, complementary minors of the inverse. So with that you can get something. Yeah, it's not too hard. We can get something. So you can get.
Maybe I just interrupting too much.
Yeah.
The Q you're saying as a scalar. Okay. I mean, whereas when you're talking of zeta function, then this Q is a variable.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you're saying up to a scalar, it's a scalar in Q.
No. Scalar meaning up to a scalar meaning. See, you look at the determinant of the Q Laplacian, then you have to do 1 minus Q squared power m minus n. There is one term there. That term I'm calling a scalar. So when I say up to a scalar, determinant of Q Laplacian, but there is one multiplicative factor. If that up to a scalar, I can change it to multiplicative up to a multiplicative factor.
Which depends on U. Okay, it's not like 5 or something. Okay.
Yeah. That scalar factor depends upon the number of edges and the number of vertices in the graph. That's
no, it depends on U.
What is U?
The variable. I'm thinking of Q as a variable. No.
Yeah, but what is U?
No, Q is U. Okay.
Oh, Q is U. Okay. And so the multiplicative factor is not the multiplicative factor will be 1 minus Q squared for me. You can put it 1 minus U squared power some m minus n or n minus m. I don't remember the exponent. It's either negative.
Yeah.
So that it depends on the number of edges and the number of vertices. So that multiplicative factor is there. That's the only thing that I call as saying up to scalar. So I can say up to a multiplicative factor. That is fine. Yeah. Correct. That's correct. All right. So what is the consequence? So this arithmetic Tutt polynomial has another consequence in another very, very interesting area, which is what we study. I taught a full course last January, that is in this pandemic period. This is 2021. No? So 2021 January to April, I taught a full course out of a book, which I'm going to refer to and show below, in which we have these things called zonotopes and Erhard polynomials. This is the Erhard polynomial is again a very interesting polynomial associated to a polytope. So polytope in general is a convex. See, somehow this polytopes, the background required is reasonably minimal, but it's not taught in MSc courses. I don't know many MSc programs where polytopes are taught, where matroids are taught, where even little more advanced linear algebra is taught, because those are very important. I mean, the other things are also important, but at least you can keep this as an elective so that people can choose if they want. No? That's what I would try to say. So a polytope is defined as the convex hull of a finite set of points. So convex hull meaning you look at points in R to the D. You look at the smallest, you put a rubber band around it. All edges will become then straight lines. You look at the smallest convex set that contains these points V1, V2 to Vn. Yeah, in RD. Yeah. So a rubber band is a good illustration on the plane. If you want 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, it will be 3-dimensional. You can put a rubber sheet. 4-dimensional, it's hard to visualize. It gets a little tough. Yeah. So the dimension, so these are standard things. If you do any, there is a good book by Barvinov, lectures on convexity, a course in convexity, and Ziegler has a good book, lectures on polytopes. These are good references. So for a polytope, we have this idea of dimension, which is the span of, you look at x plus lambda into x minus y, or x comma y are in the polytope. Yeah. So you just vary over this. This is an affine space. Essentially the affine space. Affine space meaning it's a translate of a linear space. That's the only thing. See, Ax equal to B, if you look at the solutions, set of solutions, that will be an affine space. Ax equal to 0, if you look at, that will be a vector space, the set of all solutions. Because that's the null space of some matrix, that is a vector space. If you put Ax equal to B, you're just translating. So you would have studied all solutions to Ax equal to B are translates of the corresponding homogeneous system of linear equations. So affine and vector space are just translates of each other. Yeah. So if you have an affine space, you translate it to 0. And then you will get a vector space. What is the dimension? That is the dimension of the affine space. That's what we do. Yeah. All right. So if you have a convex object, there are some extreme points. This is again, very, very studied by people who do combinatorial optimization. So you define, let's say in people who study linear programming, the set over which you are trying to optimize, that will be a convex set. If you have a set of inequalities, linear inequalities, their intersection will be a convex set in Rn. Yeah. So that's why this people who study linear programming, linear optimization, they will all study polytopes well. Yeah. And that's a good area. Polytopes is studied well. Geometric combinatorics is full of such study of polytopes. And so there are these, you have these polytopes, like if you have, in 2D it's very easy. There may be some number of extreme points, that is you can't write it as a convex combination of any other point in the polytope. If you take any other point, if you have, let's say, a pentagon, some point inside, you can firstly triangulate the pentagon, and then if it's inside some triangle, it will be actually some convex combination of the extreme points of the triangle which it is lying in. That you can think, that. So that kind of thing you can get. Extreme points are, see, the points which cannot be written as convex combinations of anything. So you can only write it as one times itself. That's the only way to write it. Yeah, you cannot write it as a convex combination of other points inside the polytope. So that's, and why are we studying extreme points? Because you look at this convex optimization, maxima or minima are attained at the extreme points. It will not be attained at some interior point. Maybe it will, interior points also, there is an extreme point which is attaining maxima and minima. That is one of the standard theorems in linear programming. Yeah. So let's start with, those are some basic things we require for polytopes. So if P is a d-dimensional polytope, so the polytope meaning it's bounded. So the number of integer points that are contained in it, that's finite, because the polytope itself is bounded. So the number of integer points in it is also bounded. Yeah. So in general, in combinatorics, we don't ask, how many. So if you ask how many integer points are there, you will get a number as an answer. So we generally want to have a lot of questions answered in one go. So we ask, you look at the dilation of the polytope. So I'll give you an example. Here is a polytope. You look at the 2 dilation. So the 2 dilation meaning what will happen? You dilate. Is my cursor visible? That arrow. So if you dilate this by a factor 2, what will happen? Instead of the extreme points being 0, 0, 1, 0, the usual unit square, it will become the square with length 2 if you dilate it by factor 2. If you dilate it by factor 3, it will become the square with length 3. Is it clear? So in general, we try to study the dilation. P2 is all 2x where x is in P. Yeah, this is also a polytope. In general, if you look at the Rx dilation, PR, look at Rx where x is in P. So you look at the number of integer points in P, number of integer points in 2P, so on. Yeah. So you get a sequence of positive integers, and then you try to find a generating function for this, or some polynomial which when you plug in something, you get in these numbers. So these are the things that we study. Yeah. So is it clear? Number of integer points in this polytope, the unit square, number of integer points is 4 because the 4 endpoints are there. If you dilate it by a factor 2, so that means you get the 2-dimensional. That is, everything gets blown up by a factor of 2. So the number of integer points becomes 9. Is it clear? And then if you look at factor 3, it will become 16. So in general, the number of integer points in the Rx dilation will be R plus 1 whole square. Is it clear? This from this example. So in general, if you have a unit square in d dimension, so I should not call unit square, maybe unit cube, the cuboid in d dimension, you will get R plus 1 to the d. Yeah. This is the standard thing. If you generalize to higher dimensions. So this is what this Erhard proved. This Erhard, he has an interesting history. He used to teach in a school in, so they call Lycée, L-Y-C-E-E. That's the word. It means high school in France. In France, he used to teach a high school, that is classes 8 to 12. And then on his side time, in his spare time, so this is 1967. This is not very old. Erhard was alive till 80s. He used to do some maths on his own, just out of curiosity. And then he came up with this amazing theorem, which is now studied often by combinatorists. So if you have a d-dimensional integral polytope, then there exists a polynomial of degree d, such that if you plug in R in that polynomial, you will get the number of integer points in the Rth dilate of that polytope. Is it clear? The statement, see, you start with a polytope, integral polytope, that is, it should have integer extreme points. Yeah. If you have irrational, then there is no theory. If you have rational, you can still get something that's more complicated. Integer is good. Yeah. You start with a integral polytope, then it's a polytope in d dimensions, let's say. Then there exists a degree d polynomial called the Erhard polynomial of that polytope. That's why Erhard P of x. In this polytope, in this polynomial, you plug in the value r, you will get the number of integer points in the Rth dilate of the polytope. Yeah. This is similar to what we have in this thing. So what is the polynomial? The polynomial is R plus 1 whole square. This illustration is here. If you look at the unit square, the polynomial is R plus 1 whole square. If you look at the unit cube in d dimensions, it is R plus 1 whole to the d. You get such a polynomial. This is true for arbitrary polynomials. Yeah? We have seen one example that doesn't prove much, but this theorem of Erhard says you can do this. And why are we saying this Erhard theory? Because this has connections to the arithmetic Tat polynomial. Yeah, so this is a good these two books are very good. So somehow this cover page it blended with the background, so I don't know why it happened, but these are good books, computing the continuous discretely, Beck and Robbins, and this book by Beck and Raman Sanyal. So I taught a course out of this book by Matthias Beck and Raman Sanyal, this combinatorial reciprocity theorems. Yeah, so this is a good book. Yeah, so this so what I'm saying is, do I have some time? Yeah, I have 5 minutes. See, I'll tell you. See, instead of having an arbitrary polytope, if you start with what is called a zonotope, which is you take k vectors and you look at the Minkowski sum. Minkowski sum meaning you look at all possible x1 plus x2 plus xk, where xi belongs to this line Li. Yeah. So Li is the closed line segment joining the origin to Vi. So you start with Vi vectors. So you start with vectors in R to the n. Yeah. You look at the line segment joining origin to these vectors. Yeah. And then you look at the Minkowski sum is just, you look at all this x1 plus x2. Look at any vector in this. So I'll give you an illustration. Yeah. So here is an illustration. So I start with 3 vectors v1, v2, v3. So what all vectors will come in the Minkowski sum? You will get this. So is it clear this what is drawn with this red outline plus this blue v1, v3? All these points in R2, they are all the Minkowski sum, because any point here you can obtain as a sum of, see, any point in this you can obtain a sum of v1 plus v2. Any point here you can obtain a sum of v1 plus v3. Any point here you can obtain a sum of v1 plus v2 plus v3. This, in fact, it decomposes nicely. So this kind of polytope is called a zonotope. And for zonotopes, there is a good theory for the Erhard theory. There's a good developed theory for Erhard theory, and that has connections to the arithmetic Tat polynomial. Yeah. So I'll maybe consider. So you given an integer matrix M, we can think of the rows or the columns of M as the vectors forming a zonotope. So now you have a given matrix M. You look at the columns. That's okay for this talk. You can change all rows to columns, and you look at the columns of this matrix. You look at the line segment joining the origin. So they're all in d dimensions. You look at the line segment joining origin to this vector. So that gives you a line segment. Now you look at the Minkowski sum. That will give you a zonotope, which is a polytope. And if you want to find the Erhard polynomial of the polytope, that is related to the arithmetic Tat polynomial. So this is the theorem of some Adiero and Mochi. So this is a recent theorem. Yeah, you get the Erhard polynomial of the zonotope by plugging in something for the arithmetic Tat polynomial. So is it clear? This is another connection. So just like that, Brailovsky wrote a survey with some 19 connections to the Tat polynomial. Now I think we have to write up a survey where the arithmetic Tat polynomial is appearing. So here is one context. So the Erhard polynomial of the zonotope, that we have. So is the setup clear? We have a matrix M. You look at the columns of that matrix M. Those are all you treat, and this is an integral matrix. You treat the columns of that matrix M as points in Z to the some dimension, yeah, Z to the D. And now you look at the line segment joining origin to that. And then now you look at the Minkowski sum. Minkowski sum is you just look at all possible sums. In that polytope, how many? So that polytope is again a polytope. Because you started with integral vectors, the extreme points are all integers. So the Erhard theorem applies. So you can get this Erhard theorem applies. You can get a polynomial. What is that polynomial? That Erhard polynomial. You have to do some work, but here is a theorem which says that Erhard polynomial is actually equal to some you plug in the arithmetic Tat polynomial, 1 plus 1 by x comma 1, and x to the n you multiply. That's all you do. This is what you do. So by this theorem, we get this corollary, the Erhard polynomial of the zonotope. That is, zonotope is just a polytope, the Minkowski sum, induced by the row vectors, I say, column vectors you can do of LT and EDT. Both are independent of the tree and only depend on the number of vertices n in the tree. Yeah. So these are just some corollaries. So my aim is to try to tell people, that if you look at this, the world has gone way ahead. Every day when I see some archive or something, every week I think, oh boy, there is so much to read. The rate at which material gets accumulated far surpasses the rate at which I can read. So the world is just going at a blazing pace. So we have to keep catching up. We have to keep doing things on our own. That's the point. So I want to try to tell people, that we have to keep a lot of catching up. When you go to other places, people are working very, very hard, and definitely I will say that being in IIT, I have a lot of time. I should say that, because my teaching hours, number of hours I teach will be only of the order of 5 or 6 per week. So it gives me some time. So I'm able to pursue whatever I feel like. And those of you who have that pleasure, that luxury, definitely please go for it, because I mean, you just have you have a lot of time now. Just read what you're interested in, try to come up with some good question and try to answer it, and that's all there is. So I mean, this is the end of the talk that I have. If there are questions, I will take them. So here the basic point I want to convey is, we are trying to mix some matrices. So we have a lot of results on matrices, Bapat and myself, and Bapat separately has even more. I also have some more, but we have some results on matrices, and then you can place them in different contexts. So yesterday we saw how to just try to get a generalization, and then today we've seen how to fit results of that we have about matrices in some context of matroids. And matroids, if they are not known, I mean, the reference, this Gary Gordon and Jennifer McNulty. Can I go back? Page home. Home. This is a good book. Yeah, this is a very strongly recommended book. So I once gave this to a student who wanted to do some summer reading course, and the student said, "Very good books. I'm very happy." And then the worst thing is, he just took away my copy. So I lost my copy. But anyway, you can get it's okay. Students are like that, man. It's okay. Nothing. I don't blame them. Yeah. But the book is so good that some student felt that it's better with him. In that sense, I'm quite happy that I bought this book, because some student who had no idea of matroid theory, he started reading it from this book, and then he found it so good that he just took it away. So it's that good. So I definitely recommend this book for people who are interested in matroid theory. And in general, if there are other things that people are doing, I would also like to learn, because I'm doing something, but others may also be doing interesting things. Unless we talk, we will not know. So here in this talk, at least the takeaway that I want to present is that results about matrices can be presented in the context of some larger context, like matroids or something else, and then you can try to do something, about that. So in the process, I learned a lot of matroids. I learned a lot of arithmetic matroids. It was good for me, just that I could learn. So when I talk to people, they tell me, okay, this it's interesting. So that's the only point. You can place some results that you have, and that origin comes from some simple linear algebra. Some explorations on matrices that are associated to trees, and then you try to put them in some different context. You get something interesting. Yeah. So any questions? So this book I strongly recommend. This Gary Gordon and Jennifer McNulty.
Okay. So these Erhard polynomials are, I think, they appear as Hilbert polynomials, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
They appear as Hilbert polynomials for some appropriate rings. Yeah. Where is it? This is so somehow this cover page, somehow it came white, and I didn't get a color version. Somehow what I have is not a color version. Somehow it's okay when I download it. Yeah. So these both are very good books.
There's a general sort of, again, I don't know whether this makes sense, but one is talking about zeta functions for graphs.
Yeah.
And you have a covering of the graph.
Yeah.
Then zeta inverse of the downstairs thing divides the zeta inverse of the
upstairs. Yes.
That's this kind of business.
Correct.
Now the trees are all, the universal covering space of a graph is a tree.
Correct.
Okay. So and all the intermediate covering spaces of a graph consists of taking a spanning graph of the tree and doing various going in between sheets of the tree.
Correct.
Something like this.
Correct. Yeah.
And what you have is that these determinants are determinants of the tree.
Correct.
We're talking about determinants of the tree.
Yeah.
So if you have a graph whose universal covering space is that tree, then you should be able to say something about the intermediate covering spaces of the graph between the graph and the covering space, universal covering space of the tree.
Correct. Somewhere in between. No, you're saying just not the extreme, somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Because the results you have is at the top.
At the top. Yeah.
And you have something at the graph downstairs.
Therefore,
you should be able to get something in between about
correct. By intermediate values.
What happens was zeta function.
Yeah. by intermediate. I mean, I don't know. Some intermediate value theorem. Somewhere in between, you should get some values. Yeah. Good question. I don't know. I never thought of this. We can do something.
Okay.
Yeah, we can try to do. Yeah.
Because this is exactly what is going on in zeta functions. This is
Correct,
what you do in zeta functions.
Correct.
Covering spaces of graphs, you have everything like Galois theory and whatever is going on there.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
So this might be, I mean, the point is even for the matroids.
Yeah.
You know, the graphical matroids. Don't talk
Yeah,
about
graphical,
So graphical matroids, there should be something corresponding to this.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know this. And you see, because that correct. There should be definitely something related to. And in fact, as you're saying, see that if you look at that arithmetic polynomial at the top, no, that seems to be related to that Erhard polynomial of the zonotope. So in between, if you get something, no, is it related to some Erhard polynomial of some other zonotope? All that is good question. I don't know. Yeah, these are all good questions. Yeah. Good. I will definitely think about them. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I will send the slides this time. So this time, I somehow chose a topic where some matroids involved. For the third talk that I have, again, that will be more elementary. Elementary in the sense some posets will be there. It is some talk on trees where optimization properties, several properties, which you optimize, turn out to have maxima as either star or the path. And then why is that so? So there is some poset we can form, and then there's the monotonic property of that on the posets. And then we do something else. My student did something else. So that is even more accessible. So there won't be any matroid or any such thing. Yeah. So I just thought, I have not done this matroid in a while. Let me just give a talk just for yeah. So the background, if you want, as I've said, this book by Procesi and De Concini, that is also a good book. Yeah, this one. This is also a good book. Background required to read this book is not much. It's quite reasonably straightforward. And once you know some matroid, these again are good. So among the two, if you are reading, I definitely suggest go for this Gordon and McNulty, that book first, and then this. Yeah. Or I'll send the slides to Professor Ganesh like I did yesterday.
Yeah. You can send me the slides.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll forward them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Questions? Yeah. Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So see you on Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah. 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bye. Take care.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah.